And we're live on Book Chat Live. And due to weird microphone issues, I look like I'm working at McDonald's drive-thru. So apologies to McDonald's drive-thru people for anything bad I've said to you, because it's... And this week we have the amazing Amanda Webb on the show. And yes, welcome to the show, Amanda.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here talking about something that isn't marketing.
Yes. And you haven't written any... Well, I think you have written a book sometime in the past or been co-author of a book, but you're not talking about that today because you're talking about all your favourite non-marketing books.
Yeah, and most of them are fiction as well. I think a lot of people are really snobby about fiction, and I'm like, that's where the best writing is. So most of them, not all of them, are fiction.
Okay, shall we kick off with the first book then?
Let's.
Right. And the first one is The Travelling Cat Chronicles by Hiro Arikawa. I got that right. Mispronounced it.
Yeah, I'm not sure how to pronounce it either. But I mean, I think everyone who knows me knows I'm into cats. Like I have 3 cats. They are, apart from my husband, they are my second, third, and fourth loves. So I don't really like reading books about animals because I don't like things that make me cry in general. And I think we know from all the films we've seen, like Lassie and, all those films with animals, usually they make you cry. This did make me cry, but not for the reasons that I thought. Towards the end, I was sobbing, and then I was really annoyed that I read it. But it's such a good read. I really like reading books that are in translation as well. So this is Japanese originally. I just think there's something so clean about the language. So it's basically the story of a cat told from a cat's point of view about a man visiting all his friends because he's looking for a new home for this cat. And it tells his life story through the cat's point of view, which I think is really cool. And then I'm not going to tell you what made me cry, but I was literally sobbing. Luckily, I was on my own, not on a train or something. That's what I can say. So if you like tearjerkers, great. If you don't, just skip the last 2 chapters.
Okay. How is it a long book or is it a short one?
No, it's quite short. I mean, I have it on Kindle. It's always hard to tell, but I read it quite fast. And again, because it's in translation, there's no difficult language to jump over. It's quite straightforward. It's just a lovely story. And also, as a cat lover, I know that cats actually do like humans and they do attach themselves to humans. Like mine are virtually like dogs. So if you are a cat lover, you're going to love that side of the story as well.
Okay. And I was going to say how you found it, but you probably found it because it's got cats in it. Is that the right estimation?
I think Amazon were advertising it to me, or it came through, that, is it BookBub it's called? That email and I went, it's about cats, I must buy it. But I've held off buying any of his others because I'm not sure I can do with another book that's going to make me cry. So, but there are others there.
Okay, shall we move on to the next book then?
Okay.
The List by Yomi Adegoke. So why this book?
So this, I did have a physical copy. I got it out of the library. It's actually based around kind of like a digital marketing social media story. So it's not completely out of marketing, but it's fiction. And the premise is there's this couple, they're in love, they're about to get married. And then there is a list published on the internet of scumbaggy men in the media. And her husband is on that list. And it's the story of how their relationship progresses, how the internet works and how the rumor mill works and how, like, she's a journalist, so she investigates it. But, it's quite traumatic, but it didn't make me cry. I'd just like to mention that. So it kind of fits that parameter. It's fascinating as well because it's like they're both of African descent. So I think I like reading books like that because I feel like I'm learning something about a different culture as well. And lots of things, like the lead character's name is, and I'm going to pronounce it wrong again, is Ola, O-L-A. And I think I used to know someone called Ola and I used to call her Ola. And apparently this is a common mispronunciation. And I just felt like such an idiot for pronouncing her name wrong the whole time. But I think that I'm interested. I've seen like the bad as well as the good that the internet can do. We've all seen rumors being published online about famous people that people tend to believe because they're out there. So I think we're all familiar with this type of storyline, but it also investigates kind of like misogyny and like also like the culture of women against men. So it doesn't single out one side as being right, but the culture of a whole masculine society and a culture of whole feminine society, and how that can add to a clash as well. So it's a really interesting read.
And where is it actually set? Is it set?
London.
Oh, okay.
It's in London, isn't it? So yeah, they go into prep for a coffee. Like it's very, you feel like you know where they are. It's cool.
Oh, okay. Right. Let's go on to the next book then. Right. Meat by Joseph de Lacy.
I picked this up because I'm a horror fan, so you'll find a few horror books amongst here.
Ooh.
And Stephen King said this was a must read. So I'm trying to remember. I think I got this one out of the library as well. No, I have it on Kindle.
Yeah.
And I think I also got it through BookBub, and it said Stephen King loves this book. So I was like, well, I'm going to get it. And it's a story basically of it's kind of very Margaret Atwoody kind of society where there are kind of like, there's a religious group of people and there's a culture of eating meat and the way that the meat's brought up, and it tells the stories of the people who work in the meat factory basically. So the animals go all the way through, like being born, growing up to slaughter. And it also tells the story of the people who consume the meat. I don't want to give away too much because it's very twisty, but it's very Margaret Atwoody. So it's a cross between Stephen King and Margaret Atwood. If you kind of like that dystopian fiction, it's cool. And it has all the classic tropes, like there's a society of people that are living underground, and there's like the kind of Christian religious leader against kind of the hippie leader. There's a lot of the stuff that you'll see in dystopian fiction, but it's good fun to read. Quite horrible, but great fun. That makes me happy. Horror I can take, sadness not.
Oh, okay. I'd like to apologise currently it's one person watching on Amazon Live. For some reason, all the actual book links don't seem to have populated. Not that anybody buys anything on it anyway, but so
I thought you were going to apologise
for
for me swearing. I thought I'd sworn by accident then.
I'd
like to apologise for Amanda's language, but I haven't.
Yes, I'd like to apologise for the colour of this wall chart behind. It's very thing. Anyway, should we go on to the next book? Right.
Yeah.
Here we go. Disobedience by Naomi Alderman.
So this, I think it was her first book. I've read 3 of her books. The second one, The Power, it was made into a TV series. And there's kind of like a feminist dystopian theme going through this.
Yeah.
So the power is a read. But this is, it's not like fantasy at all. It's set in a Jewish community where there is a character who is gay. Basically, she's gay. And so it brings her into that culture, again, strict religious culture. She's in a very Orthodox Jewish community, and how she struggles to kind of find herself as a lesbian woman within that community, and how miserable she is. And then at the same time, it's not anti-Jewish, it's not anti-Semitic. I'm pretty sure she's Jewish herself. It's just kind of like being trapped in that relationship. Nobody comes out as being the bad guy here, even her husband, even her father. It's just kind of like how she felt smothered by religion. And if you've read any of her other books, she's a great author. She keeps you on the edge of the seat the whole time, and there's no difference with this. It's just, it has humor as well. I think that's the thing. You don't want to read a story. We've established I don't like crying, right? So you don't want to be crying at a book. There's humor in it. And also that it's much like The List. It's an investigation of a community that I don't know a lot about. So, I find out a lot about the Jewish community through reading it, and I always find that's really interesting. It brings me to another world that I didn't know about. Also set in London, weirdly.
Yeah. So do you actively look for books that are from a different background to ones you've read before, or do you have a theme that you kind of follow in terms of reading books of a time? How does your book choice work in the real world?
So not really. I stumble across stuff. I try and have like a really diverse. I could have come up with easily another 15 different books to this. but I
Yeah.
like to be challenged into reading something I wouldn't normally read. And sometimes that doesn't work out. So I just read Netherland, which was on, I can't even remember who wrote it, but it sounded like an Irish name. It's not Irish.
Yeah.
Oh, he is Irish. I think he's from Cork, but he lives in London or something. But it was one of Barack Obama's recommended books. Didn't really enjoy it. That's the third time I've had a bad experiment this year. Horror will usually get me. If Stephen King says something's good and it's horror, I'll give it a go. And then I suppose, you know, I like to read female authors as well. I like to see those perspectives. I do find it interesting when it's about a different culture, but neither of those two books, The List or Disobedience, did I pick up because they were about different cultures. But that's part of the enjoyment I got from them.
Yeah. Well, I'm now quite lazy, and I just go on the books that people have recommended on this show that have done well on affiliate income, because there's so many.
Well, that's
books
a good way. It's as good way as any to choose. Like, I think two of the books I've listed came from a book club that we had that was really thriving for many, many years until COVID. And we've had 2 meetings since COVID. So it's kind of died. But that was a good way for me to find other books to read rather than just get stuck reading the same author or the same type of book all the time.
Yeah. Okay, let's go on to the next book. Learned by Heart by Emma Donoghue.
So Emma Donoghue is an Irish writer, and this is the story. I don't know if you saw the TV series Gentleman Jack.
No,
but that it was about, like, basically, obviously lesbian fiction must be featuring quite heavily as well now. It was basically the first lesbian story of the first lesbian who was out and out lesbian. Obviously, you know, there have always been lesbians, but
I know,
completely out and outrageous.
Yeah.
And it's the same character in this book, but it's about her early life. Well, it's told from the point of view of her first girlfriend and her coming into the school where she was and just being this outrageous character and how she was attracted to them and the relationship they had. It's told through a series of letters. And it is really, I didn't know it was about that character at the time. I was just like, oh, this is a really interesting story. It's not my first Emma Donoghue. They're all historical fiction. They're not all historical fiction, but that's many of them are. So I should have kind of got it. But I just found it the characters are painted so well. It's such an interesting story that it just kept me hooked. And then you're going, really? There was like a really out lesbian then, back in those days. And then you start researching it and you find out, oh, yeah, it's the same one. It's the same one from Gentleman Jack. So it's, definitely worth it. In fact, any of Emma Donoghue. She also wrote Room, which is why I was kind of going, I don't think that's historical fiction, with the Oscar-winning Irish film. I should mention that.
Yeah. Okay. No, well, I've had what's called sapphic fiction now, because they don't want to exclude trans people from that genre. But yeah, we've had quite a few lesbian fiction books on the show before, or sapphic fiction. Even I'm making a mistake now.
I don't even think this is my last one on the list, but it's not. Again, I'm not attracted to books that are about lesbians. It just it's just a good book.
Yeah, well, as I went to your heterosexual wedding, I'm like, I'm getting concerned now.
There are plenty of gay people there, Tim. There are plenty.
Yeah. Right, let's go on to the next book. Our Share of Night by Mariana Enriquez.
So I love this. Again, I think it's in translation. I'm just going to say I think, but it mixes horror and politics. It's set in Argentina during the end of the dictatorship, but it's not about that. It's tying like really kind of H.P. Lovecraft type of horror to the politics of Argentina. Now that sounds really dull, doesn't it? Yeah. But it's not. It's really, really cool. There's like proper, it starts off and it's just, you just think if it's a story, a road trip story, that's how it is. And then you start like, it's all the horror starts sneaking in. I mean, for the first maybe 100 pages, I kept going, I thought this was a horror novel. It's just a road trip. It's just like a guy and his son. Like, what's going on? And it slowly creeps in. And it really is like nasty, nasty horror. Like people doing horrible atrocities. But that's how it ties into the dictatorship and what was going on in Argentina at the time that it's set. So I really can't wait to read her other books. This is possibly my favorite book out of all of the ones I've listed. I just really loved it. It is a big chunky book now. I found that because I was in London. I went to Foyles, as I always do, because you do. For anyone that doesn't know London, it used to be the biggest bookshop in the UK. Not anymore, but it's still like a tradition to go there. And it was there on the shelves of like recommended books. And I was like, oh, that looks great. I can get that out of the library, because I'm stingy like that. Well, it's not that. It's just my bookshelves are all full. So I don't buy books as much as possible. I try not to buy them. And I just picked it up and I got it in the library and I just absolutely loved it. I raced through it.
Yeah. So what do you think of the new font? They redesigned it a few years ago, Foyles. It used to have like really hard to find. I preferred it in the old way. It used to be small little rooms and you couldn't find anything, but now it's open plan.
Well, that was the problem. You couldn't find anything. They used to, if you bought a book, they even had that system with the vacuum tube system, didn't they? And you'd had to go and get like a little ticket for the book, and then they'd zap it down somewhere, and then you had to go and pay for it with the ticket. It was a really convoluted system. I doubt they sold as much as they should have done during those days. You miss it, but you kind of get why things are easy to find in there now, and it's a normal checkout process. So, but I still go there. I remember my first trip there when I was a kid, and I bought an Enid Blyton book. Yeah, I'm just kind of like, that's not good. But I bought an Enid Blyton Famous Five book there, and I was like, this is the most exciting thing ever. I've been to the biggest bookshop in the world. So it's almost as good as Hamley's.
Yeah. Okay. Well, on that note, let's go on to the next book. Consumed by David Cronenberg. And is this the guy who's the film director? Oh, it is.
Yeah, it is. So again, I like my horror, whether it's on film or whether it's in books. So big fan. David Cronenberg's kind of body horror stuff. And his son he still makes films, but his son is now Brandon Cronenberg is now making films as well. And I think they're better even. One of my favorite films, I know this isn't a film, chat. One of my favorite films of last year was Infinity Pool, which was his. And it's all along the same lines. And I had this sitting there for ages. I picked it up because it was David Cronenberg, and I was going, oh, this is going to be a really difficult read. So I kept putting off reading it because I was like, I think somebody said, like one of the reviews suggested that it was going to be really difficult. But it wasn't. It was just like one of his films. It was like reading a film. So except he was able to have a larger canvas because he had a bigger budget, obviously, because he's got the budget that's going on in our brain. Yeah. So really, if you like David Cronenberg, if you like his films, you'll like this book, and it's not a difficult read at all.
Yeah,
the story is like a weird disease thing, body horror. That's all you need to know.
I remember watching one of his films years ago, and it was very strange. I can't remember which one it was.
Videodrome? Crash?
Yeah, I think it was Videodrome, actually.
Yeah, that's kind of the original where we all found him. And then there was the one with the exploding head. What was that called? I can't remember now, but that was the one we'd all watch in college over and over again because somebody's head's exposed. It's like, yeah, it's amazing. I think Videodrome's better.
Like Scanners or something else. Anyway.
Scanners, that's the one with the exploding head. Yes.
Yeah.
No exploding heads in this, but there is horrible things like that.
Before our heads explode, let's go on to the next book. Men Who Hate Women by Laura Bates. I moved this from the top because I thought it might send
people off. Okay, got this one out of the library.
Yeah.
This isn't fiction. This is like journalism. And as soon as I started reading it, I wished I hadn't. So it's a weird one to recommend because it's basically, we walk around in this world thinking we all like each other. Like we like each other, Tim. You're a man. I'm a woman. I think you like me. But there is a subset of men, particularly, who really dislike women. And you come across this to an extent that they think raping women is okay, to an extent that they think, that women get everything they deserve and they should be gang raped. And so the incel community that we hear a lot of and most people just laugh about. There was a really weird incident where, I think one of them went on he shot a whole load of people and said it was because women had always been mean to him or something. And one guy from the incel community said, oh, look, all that stuff you see in the incel community, that's just a bit of banter. And then the incel community turned against him and goes, no, it's not. This is what we believe. And it's like, it's kind of scary. That's why I wished I hadn't read it, because I kind of go like, guys or girls, we're all kind of like human beings. We all kind of interact with each other and like each other. And it's kind of scary from that point of view. And also scary because the likes of that man who owns Twitter, I wish I had my bell, like perpetuates this sort of stuff as well. Somebody was telling me the other day, they were on a thing with him, live chat thing, I've even Twitter space, I think, that he was presenting, and there was that sort of laddish humor going on. So I think I wish I hadn't read it, but I still think it's worth reading, even if you're a man, because actually maybe more so if you're a man, because if you're a good man, you'll go, oh, this is shit, I must stay away from those people, they're not only joking. And if you're a woman, you'll just want to go and hide from men for the rest of your life.
Well, that's great to have.
That's a very positive end. Well, it's definitely worth reading, though.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. I mean, I was kind of, I mean, there were some books you hear about, like, and you're like, oh, I don't know, but it's like, you always like to have something a bit challenging to read. So maybe I'll, in 20 years' time, when I get through all the other recommendations, I'll be like, but yeah, society's so segregated now. There's so many echo chambers of communities online, and I used to think it was like, oh, there's like these people are out of touch, and then you realise that everybody's out of touch. Everybody's out of touch with each other, and it is quite dangerous, these little communities that develop nowadays.
I wanted to mention one of my favourite films, though, because that's what cheered me up about the book, Magnolia. Have you seen Magnolia? So there is a whole section on people that are like Tom Cruise's character in Magnolia, who says respect the, and I'm not going to say it because it'd be a swear word. Oh. And it's like, so, you know, that gave me a little bit of joy, remembering I had to watch Magnolia again. And I do, it's not an anti-man book. It's like it's an anti-men who hate women book, but it's not an anti-man book.
Okay. Right. On that note, let's move swiftly on. Strange Flowers by Donal Ryan. Mispronouncing his name.
Yeah, Donal Ryan. So another Irish author. And I read this book when I was in queues in Disney, waiting to get on rides. Yeah. So quite an intensive read. There's lesbians in this one as well. Okay, it's a story set in like rural Ireland, maybe I want to say the 60s or 70s. I could be wrong about that. It could be more, but with rural Ireland, it's always hard to tell. And about a family, a really lovely family, and the daughter of the family goes missing, just walks out of home one day and doesn't come home for years, and there's no contact with her. So obviously her parents are in bits, but she's gone to London. And when she comes back, she does come back. Obviously, they're delighted to see her, and she doesn't want to talk about what happened. And then they find this man, a black man, in the next town with his family, because she's run off and left him with their baby. Yeah. So for rural Ireland, that would be a massive cultural shock. But also, it's a story about how welcoming and warm, and even like under like deep Catholicism and deep religion, that people are kind of open and welcoming, even in these like places out in the sticks where, you know, you think there is no society. So it's really nice. It's just it's a very warming story, and there are lesbians in it, but I won't spoil that bit about who they are. Yeah. It's part of a series. So the second part I read, I didn't enjoy it as much. I think you have to be in a queue in Disney to enjoy it as much as I did the first time, but I still enjoyed it. Second one was called The Queen of Dirt Island, and it follows the story. It progresses to the next generation, which is really interesting too. Yeah.
Well, I mean, there's probably quite a few viewers that don't appreciate that you're an English person who's been living in Ireland for quite a while indeed. Now. So
yeah,
I can understand
almost 30 years.
Yeah.
But the same could be for any small community, no matter where you are. So if you think of like an out of the way community somewhere in like the Scotland, for example, you know, there's communities like that everywhere that you would imagine are cut off from the world, but are still very welcoming and open to outsiders.
Okay, and let's go on to the next book, which is an Irish person who's in England. So... The Home Stretch by Graham Norton. I think his name.
Indeed. Yeah, he lives in London.
Yeah.
We lost him. You got him. They got me though. They got me
Was
in
it like
return.
was it like an
Fair
exchange?
exchange. Yeah.
You're on like the ferry and you get to be exchanged at the same time.
So this is an odd one. I know a lot of people are snobby about Graham Norton's fiction, thinking, well, I mean, quite rightly, obviously people were more willing to talk to him because he was a celebrity first and they knew his books would sell. But a lot of people get upset by that. And like, his books are so diverse. Every book is very different from the other. But for me, this is the one where his writing really was at its best. The story, the writing, the characters, everything was incredible. And it's set in Ireland. It's set in Cork, which is where he's originally from. And it's about a car crash that happens to a bunch of teenagers and ends up in killing a bunch of them. And one of those people said he was driving the car and he was blamed. So he left, a bit like the last story. He left home. He just went to Liverpool and then he went to London, basically ran away. Nobody heard from him for ages. But we follow his story and we follow the story of all the survivors and we follow what happened on the day and his eventual return and how he managed to bring himself back. And of course, there's a twist. But I think it's Graham Norton's best writing. I really think, if you felt a bit like he doesn't deserve it before, you should read this book and you'll totally think. I didn't like the next one so much. It was a bit of a weird comedy, but I really love this one.
Yeah, this book has been recommended before on this show. I didn't have the wherewithal to look up who recommended it before, but I know it has been recommended before. So, and yeah, Graham Norton and the guy who was on Pointless, and I can't remember what his name is. Who's
Richard Osman.
Richard Osman. He's very popular on this show as well. So celebrity can be successful.
There are a few kind of mainstream books that people have read that are there, but I do, I think Ireland is very rightly proud of Graham Norton. He's like an ambassador for the country, and I think we couldn't have a best one. And I'm really upset that he's no longer on Virgin Radio 2 days a week. I don't know how I survived, to be honest.
Well, let's go on to the next book. The Dictator's Wife by Freya Berry. So
this was a book club one. So I would never have read this unless it came from the book club. I think Freya's Irish as well. I think she's an Irish journalist. I could be wrong. She's a journalist. She's either from the UK or Ireland. And this, I think, is her first fiction. She has, in fact, traveled the world and spoken to dictators and dictators' wives and been immersed in that culture. And this is about kind of like she's molded them all together into this character. So it's set in a fictional state that used to be under dictatorship and is now free. And the story, again, is told by a journalist who goes to visit this dictator to write about her. I think she was commissioned to write about her, but she's from that country. She's been living overseas in the UK for a long time, but she's originally from this country. So that's why they send her to write about the story. So she knows the history and she knows how people revered this person. And it's just what I love about this book. It's got a real atmosphere. Like the whole time you're reading it, you'd kind of feel like the world closing in on you in the way a dictatorship does. But it also comments then on life after a dictatorship. And it's not always, I've got dictators a lot in this as well, haven't I?
Yeah.
It's not always the rosy picture that you think it's going to be. It takes a long time for society to reset itself. So I just love the atmosphere. I didn't want it to end because I just enjoyed living in that little world for a while.
Okay. So it sounds like your ideal book would be an Irish lesbian dictator who runs away to London, something like that.
Yes.
Okay.
But it's got a bit of horror in.
Yeah. Funny you should mention that. No, it's not the next book, but we'll go into it anyway. Well, unless I'm totally misreading what this book is about. Fran Lebowitz, The Reader by Fran Lebowitz.
So I don't know, did you see, I think it came out during lockdown, the TV series called, on Netflix, I think it was, Pretend It's a City. It was her and Martin Scorsese, or I think the correct way to pronounce his name is actually Scorsese. But I can't say that.
Yeah.
I can't say that. But basically it's their best friends and it's them in conversation and him talking to her. And she's a bit like Dorothy Parker. She's just got a great wit about her. And she's an incredible writer and she's a heavy smoker and she's gay. Just to go with my theme.
Yeah.
And it's like, but she's got a wonderful perspective on stuff. So she was playing, well, I say playing, she was in conversation in Dublin. So I went to that and I thought it was only right if I read this book before I went. So I found more about her than what was in the TV series. And it's just hilarious. It's a great read. She's just got a great style and a great way of putting things. And she's quite like straight and vocal. She reads a lot of books. So, you know, you should get her on Book Chat Live. I would watch that on repeat forever. So the thing in Dublin, people from the audience just threw questions at her and she'd spend 20 minutes answering them. She's just amazing, like really cool. So definitely, if you don't pick up that, watch Pretend It's a City, because that's great too, which I'm sure you can buy on DVD on Amazon maybe. Yeah,
well, maybe. So, anyway, before we get into trouble with them for promoting Netflix, let's go on to the next. Ruth and Pen by Emilie Pine, or Emilie.
Yeah, I don't know how you say it. Irish. Set. I like things that are set in Dublin because I lived in Dublin for maybe 15 years.
Yeah.
So it's set in a location. When they're talking about where they're going from, I can follow the story. It's about two young girls, based on, I can't remember which one it is. I think it's Ruth's perspective. And they're going to a protest in Dublin, but Ruth thinks it's more gay people. She thinks this is a date with Pen, and she's booked like a concert afterwards that they're going to, but she hasn't told her. And there's a story of the whole going to the protest and how they're feeling. And then when she's there, she thinks that she fancies this other woman. It all sounds very straightforward. And then she kind of says, look, this was supposed to be a date. And she's like, oh no, I'm not into that. And it's kind of like, it's a really nice, it's a very straightforward story, but it's packed with emotion. And then at the end, you get a little bit of it wouldn't say it's a twist at all. It's just, you know, where this friendship is. It's the story of that. And I think it's really nice. I think also, you know, we talk about the society is becoming a lot more open to relationships, same-sex relationships, trans relationships. And I think it is muddying the water, because when I was a kid, you know, you were just like, oh, does he fancy me? And if I started thinking, does she fancy me? You'd think there was something wrong with you. Whereas now we're so open about it that anyone could be a prospect for you. And I think that's kind of where this is going. It's not about being gay. It's about having this really wonderful, and they're neurodivergent as well, both of them. So it's like there is that whole kind of like package of anxiety that teenagers have to live with now. I mean, it's really great that we've opened up society, but it also is causing a lot of angst. And I think it's full of that. It's a lovely story though. And it's set in Dublin, which is the best city in the world.
Yeah, and is it set in present day Dublin? It's because obviously
modern
attitudes to that kind of thing have changed quite dramatically.
It was like, it was only just before I moved here that it was legal to be gay. I don't think they had any laws about lesbians because they didn't believe that they did that, but it was only legal to be gay. I think like 1994, and I moved in 1996. It was really close to when I moved here. I could be a few years out with my thing, but it was a lot later on than it was in the UK, and it's almost like Ireland have caught up really fast.
Yeah,
it's really bizarre.
Yeah. Okay, and let's move on to something totally different, but kind of in the theme. Misery by Stephen King. So this has obviously been on before, I
was gonna say, like, this, I did put a couple of mainstream ones in there. I love Stephen King. If I turn my camera this way, you'd see my Stephen King bookshelf. This is why I can't buy any books, because I collect first edition Stephen King books. Ooh. If anyone wants to buy me Carrie, I'm really worried he's going to die and then I'll never be able to afford it. I'm really happy with that. Since I think one of the first books, I was quite late to like reading a lot of books. I've been reading since I was a kid, but not religiously until I read The Shining. So it was the first book that really made me I want to read more. So I was kind of like, oh, I have to put a Stephen King book in there. Which book will I put? And there's so many I could have put, but I thought I'd put this because I usually like to read a book before I see a film. And then I like this to be a really big gap so that I've forgotten the book before I see the film, because they're completely different entities. And I've seen the film of Misery probably about 4 or 5 times, and I think I know it backwards. But when I read the book, I still got extra stuff out of it. There was no disappointment. There was no, oh yeah, this is just a long-winded way of telling the film, which is what I think you often get. It's the same story. There's just additions to it that I think make it really good. So if you're not reading Stephen King at the moment, but you do like a little bit of horror, but nothing too gothic, I think, that the story of Misery. Annie goes and finds her favorite writer in a ditch and is very nice to him and then very not nice to him. That's basically the story. But it's really well crafted. I think it's one of his best books. It's definitely one of the best film adaptations, because some of the film adaptations are terrible. I like The Shining. He doesn't, but it's completely different to the book, so I can see why that would be the case. So.
Yeah. I mean, this is there's lots of Stephen King books have been recommended on the show, but I think this is the most popular of his to recommend.
I mean, if you don't like horror, there's really good Stephen King books that aren't horror as well, which is, remarkable in some respects. So I'm looking over here at my book collection, because the other one I was going to recommend, everyone else has probably recommended as well. It's the JFK one. It's a date, and of course I can't remember the date. It's
that is one of his books that I've actually read. I haven't read many of his books, and I can never remember it because it's a weird US date format, isn't it?
Yeah, and I'm looking. It should be here in front of me, but I can't see
it. 11. It's
definitely 11.
11 whatever, so it's November, and I can't remember what time.
Americans are screaming at us now. They're going, what?
63 at the end of it. 11 something 63.
It should be right in front. Oh, there it is. Massive letters. 11/22/63. There you go. Yeah. So that's not got horror in. I mean, it's uncomfortable, but it's not like horror. So
I didn't like the ending though. I thought the ending was a bit of a cop out, but
he's not good at endings.
No,
he's really not. In fact, one of the things I like is the Stephen King is self-referential in a lot of his books, and he talks about himself as a fictional writer that is really bad at endings, so he knows it himself.
Anyway, let's go on to the last book, which would be your book if you were a writer, but you're not really, so it's somebody else's. Should We Stay or Should We Go by Lionel Shriver.
So Lionel Shriver is a controversial character, and I should really not like her, but I love her writing. Firstly, she's not, Lionel's a man's name, and that wasn't her original name. She changed to it. But there are things I like about her. She's very rebellious, but she's controversial, and her opinions would be, I feel like I need to say this, the opposite to mine in a lot of ways. But I've read 3 of her books now, and I'd certainly buy and read or get them out of the library a lot more of her books. This one it's post-COVID, and she mentions COVID in it. She's also self-referential, so she talks about herself in it. But the whole premise of the book is a woman and her husband have just witnessed one of their parents dying, and they say, I don't want to go through that. So I tell you what, we'll get this potion, we'll put it in the back of the fridge, and when we turn 75, there's a specific date that they've chosen. I don't know what age it was, but it was young enough that you'd still have your faculties. It was, we all take this so that we'll die on a high. And then it goes through each scenario. So if they did take it, one of them took it, if the other one took it, then the other one didn't, all the things that could possibly happen as a result of it. And I really enjoyed it. I just thought, this is a fantastic premise. And it often comes back to me, we always, there's always these little stories that kind of buzz in my head. But what if this happened? And what if that happened? That would be really interesting. So it's a nice concept. And if you don't want to give her money, you do want to give her money. You want to buy the book on Amazon. But if you don't want to give her money, just get it out of the library. She only gets like 2p for that or something. But, I think it's worth reading. We were talking about our little bubbles that we live in. I do think it's worth reading out of our bubbles sometimes. And she's a good writer. You can't deny it. And you're going to get an entertaining read. And it's also going to make you think about things. And I think that's well worth it. So I didn't know whether to add it in case everyone thought I was like a mad Lionel Shriver fan. But I am, but I'm also not.
I've seen her interviewed. I thought, she's a little bit right wing for you, but it's like
she's very right wing for me. Yeah, I'm a total lefty, but I also think we get left wing and right wing wrong. It's just putting us in silos again. Like there's a mixture of Well, I actually find it hard to say it's anything good to right wing. There are a mixture of, instead of
Yeah.
saying this is my viewpoint, we can pick different viewpoints from the world.
Yeah. Right. So, well, let me play my transition ping just a moment. So I ask, if you've seen any of these shows before, you will know that I've been asking people 2 questions. One might apply, but we'll ask that second. The first is like, if you had to recommend one of these books to somebody, what would be the flow chart, the logic choice? Or what questions would you ask the person to work out which book to recommend, or would you just pick one of them to recommend?
Do you like horror? Because so many people don't like horror that it would be a bad mistake to recommend one of the horror selections. So, do you like horror would be the first one. Do you like lesbian romance? I think I'd have to put that out there because, again,
Yeah.
it might not be the right fit. I mean, Lionel is kind of cool about that. But like, yeah, it's like, would you read lesbian romance? It's not, I mean, none of them are chick flicks, even though there is lesbian romance in there. Definitely. And then, the difficult one. The horror is a big one because I find so many people, like, I'm quite, like, I've got a hard shell for horror. So I can actually watch very scary movies and not get scared, which disappoints me. So it's, and books also, because you can skip through it. So do you want to know more about Ireland? I think that would be the third question, because I've got lots of Irish references in there as well. And there are some obviously the tradition of amazing Irish writers. There's some really bad Irish writers as well. So come to me if you want a recommendation. I'll steer you away from the bad ones.
And how would somebody get to the Travelling Cat Chronicles or David Cronenberg? Because they don't really fit any of those.
Horror. He's horror.
Oh, I suppose he's horror, yeah.
But then I'd have to say, do you like body horror? Because that's a subset of horror, and some people don't like that stuff.
Yeah.
And what was the first one? The Travelling Cat Chronicles. It's definitely an outlier. Yeah. It's definitely an outlier. Like, do you like cats? But that's only applies to one book, so it would be kind of hard to filter it down.
Yeah. Okay. And the other question I ask people is, like, if you're going to write a book, are you going to write a book? And
yeah, one day.
What would the next book be that you write? Oh, well, if you were going to write a book, what would be the book you write? I mean, obviously, I know you're getting into kind of the very exciting in some ways, but not to general people, of Google Analytics and analytics stuff and that kind of stuff. Would you write a book about it, or would you more likely write a book about lesbian dictators in Ireland or something along those lines?
So I couldn't write about lesbians because I've never had a lesbian experience. So I would only have to base it on what I read in books, and that could be completely wrong. So it's just I just thought it was really weird when I was picking through them. Like, it's not that I've gone out and been seeking lesbian fiction. It's like it just seems to be a lot of it out there. There's 2 books I'd like to write. One that I should write, which will be something to do with measuring your digital marketing. Nobody wants to know about that who's watching this, well, unless you're watching it because I'm here. I'd love to write something fiction, and it would be like suspense or horror because that's my preferred genre. And I have ideas. I was reading Ursula Le Guin has a really good, like, writer's kind of book, kind of workbook type thing that I got halfway through and came up with about 10 different ideas, and then thought I'd stop because I'd never get any work done where I make money, because we all know writing books doesn't make you money. But I think in my retirement, I'd like to write fiction. Give it a go. I'm not a colourful writer. I don't use words in the beautiful ways that other writers do, but I could totally get into your kind of like the stuff that I like about books in translation and just using plain language. I think I could do that.
Yeah. Well, it's funny you're saying that. I actually had 2 lesbian characters having a romance in one of my fantasy books. So it's like, and I'm not a lesbian, but then I'm not a dragon or a talking magpie either.
No, this is true.
So,
yeah.
wouldn't necessarily put you off, but okay. So, on the off chance that anybody's watching this who hasn't heard about you and is interested in digital marketing, can you explain about how people, or if somebody is like, they've got a question about one of these books and they want to talk to you a bit more, how can people get in touch with you and find out about you and all that other exciting stuff?
So yeah, weirdly, I don't think any of these books, apart from maybe the list, leads into me talking about digital marketing, but that's what I do. I've been doing digital marketing one sort or another for 13 years, and now I'm focused on Google Analytics, or all analytics, basically measuring your success. If you want to chat about that, you can find me on my website, spiderworking.com. If you very occasionally want to see me posting something, you can find me on Facebook. Not Amanda Webb Spiderworking, just Amanda Webb, and there's about 6,000 of us. But if you find me, you can and follow me there. And very occasionally I talk about something that isn't marketing, or on Threads, where I just once a month maybe put up something a bit random. So they're probably the best places. Or Instagram. I have a personal Instagram as well, but I promise I won't follow you back on it because it's just random things. And I'm even having to look and see what it's called at my phone right now. But that would
probably Spiderworking as well, isn't it?
No, that's my business.
Oh, is it Amanda Webb of
I am Amanda Webb. I am Amanda Webb. You will find on Instagram as I am Amanda Webb, where I post pictures of cats knitting and sometimes the books I'm reading. So that would probably be the best place. In digital marketing.
So you post pictures of cats knitting. Is this like an AI thing? That would be a fantastic AI.
I might go and set that up. I'll wait till one of them's asleep and put some knitting needles in their hands. Pause.
You could be number one cats knitting. Like all search
Instagram,
anywhere in the world. So that would be well.
I bet if I go and search it now, there are people already posting cats knitting. Sorry, I broke your wrap up there.
Well, yeah, there probably are. I mean, it's like that's the trouble. It's like everybody's competing for everything, but it's like it's a small niche, so you could dominate it. It's just like use AI, splurge the internet.
I was going to say, just have to teach the cats to knit now. That's all, and then I'll have my niche sorted.
That's a whole nother level, isn't it? So, well, thank you so much for being a guest, and
thanks for having me.
I'm gonna awkwardly finish this stream now by pressing buttons until something finishes.
Until we go away. Bye bye. I'll keep waving perpetually.
Woohoo!